showing one side when there's multiple sides, and all you have to do is literally just type, well, maybe not on Google because Google filters out the things that you can search, but there's other search engines that you can use, right? That's an availability for you, where you can search out for more unbiased opinions, more unbiased sources. That way you can be more well informed as opposed to just taking whatever it is that's being fed to you from this filter. So there's one other thing. So did you hear the news about this platform called Parler?
No.
So essentially, it's another form of social media, and it was banned off the App Store because, unlike the big social media platforms like Facebook, Google, Twitter, these guys are relatively small, but they don't really have.
This is a conversation between friends.
None of what is said here should be taken as legal advice.
We are not experts in any way.
Take what resonates and leave the rest. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. Back again for another episode. Back with your favorite Hispanics here. So today on the topics, we have censorship or censoring speech on the foundation. On the fitness section, we have caffeine, just talking about is it good, is it bad, what are our thoughts on that? And on the finance, we have basic real estate investing. News updates at the end.
Sure. You said prefer Hispanics, the Hispanics that don't look Hispanics. I look Asian, Brandy looks white. We get that a lot. But anyways, let's get started
Chinito
with
y blanco.
Chinito y Blanco. Let's get started with foundations, censoring speech. Now, this topic we came across with this topic because of what it's with the recent events with social media and banning certain people, like certain, important people. They are important.
High profile.
High profile. There you go. That's more like it. So it all began with Twitter banning Donald Trump out of the social media, followed by Facebook, YouTube, Pinterest, and other social medias that they ban indefinitely. So what is happening now? So what are your thoughts on censorship? Like good, bad? Look at about like what is our First Amendment or Second Amendment, freedom of speech?
Right. So one of the arguments is being put forward by these by all these corporations that are banning people like Trump or high profile people that they don't particularly agree with their viewpoints is that they're saying that, hypothetically, let's put Donald Trump in the point of view here, that he's promoting violent ideas, that he's promoting division, he's promoting some sort of divisiveness between people and the nation. And that's the reason why they ended up banning him. Along with the added point that there's a possibility or a high probability that Trump actually incited the Capitol Hill riots, right? Or what ended up happening in Capitol Hill the other day or the past week. So, you can see the argument from both viewpoints, right? Because you can say like, well, maybe he was inciting these violent outbursts by people because he was making them feel like their country was being taken away from them. But simultaneously, if you flip the script and now you're starting to ban people like him, now what you're doing is just giving credence, or you're empowering the people that support him and showing them that he's right, because why would you have to block him otherwise, right? So to that end, it's a tricky situation because you can if you try to take a balanced approach, you can see it from both perspectives. But at the end of the day, I would say that, in order to combat ideas that you don't think are particularly healthy or well or good, is to just fight it with better ideas, right? You have to be able to articulate your side and your viewpoints and show people why it is that it's a better alternative than whatever it is that Trump would be presenting. That's where I'm going with them.
Good. You bring good points on that sense that, you cannot go out there and banning people just because they don't agree with your ideas. And not just looking at, Donald Trump, but let's take a look on the perspective of the social media. Now, social media, the thing is that the power that lays behind these platforms is that with a click, you can reach out to thousands, if not millions of people. And you gotta be careful when spreading fake news or like misinformation that can be interpreted in a wrong way and can cause something what caused last Wednesday, like riots and violence and getting people hurt, like at the end of the day, and dividing us. Because there's some misinformation like running around, and there's something that we can talk about, like about conspiracy theories and like the scope they reach because of these platforms such as YouTube, social media, that it's easy to communicate. Like back in the days, we didn't have such a powerful tool that in order for us to gather information, we had to go to like a news source such as radio, newspapers, or just letters.
The library.
And now,
The library.
the library, yeah, and in order for us to gather this information, I feel like with the time that the event happened, it got filtered out. And in a way, you can say this can be good and bad because sometimes the powerful people, or like the people who controls the media, controls pretty much what is spread around, so they can write the story to their benefit and take that time to utilize to miswrite that information. But at the same time, living on today's age, we see that getting to know like certain information as quickly as this, like at the tip of our hands, it's powerful. Like honestly, it's very powerful and it's dangerous. My opinion is very, very dangerous because you don't know what is going to happen or what can cause. And now let's focus on like the censoring part.
Mhm.
So I understand that these media companies such as Facebook, Twitter, and Google, they are going to take precautions, and they have to. It all comes down to like morality and ethics at some point. Like, what is correct? Like, what is ethical and morally correct? Like, what sort of information or what sort of people do we want in our platform, right? And they do have the right to kind of, because it's their company, it's their media. They do have the right to censor it if it doesn't follow the guidelines. For example, if we go to Facebook, kind of blocking accounts because they promote pornography or some violence, they have the right to censor this. Why? Because you don't want to spread this out, and you don't want to be connected with this sort of information that is passing on your platform. So I understand that, but when it comes to like freedom of speech, I think everybody should have a voice, good or bad. You should be able to like talk your opinions as long as it's not hurting anyone, or as long as it's not promoting misinformation and misleading people to think what you want to think, what you want them to think, and manipulating. So in a way, kind of like building it from yesterday's topics, it can be seen as manipulating the information and manipulating the people that hears it out. And we have seen history how it repeats itself. For example, Hitler, if we talk about how he manipulated the people, make them believe that they were doing good and they were like the elite racial superiority than other people, and just making them think that Jews were bad. It's just manipulating their heads, and you use information to do so. So the power of information is enormous, dangerous, but we still need the sort of freedom to be able to speak our voices and let us heard, because I think there's more good than bad in this world, regardless.
Right. So there's two things there, right? So yeah, going back to that point of like Hitler, right? So maybe you can say there's an argument there for like that's a perfect example where censorship could have been used, right? If people were able to censor Hitler, then he wouldn't have been able to spread his misinformation or his manipulation, and then, you know, that could have prevented World War II or everything that happened with the Nazis, right? And okay, maybe there's a point to be made there. But simultaneously, you censoring speech, and here's one of the other issues, right? Hitler himself was actually censoring a bunch of information coming into Germany that would have otherwise counteracted whatever he was saying. Today, in today's day and age, with the internet and the availability of the information that we have, you're going to be hard pressed to be, you know, manipulated in one way or the other. I mean, sometimes it's easy because most people only read a headline of an article as opposed to reading the whole article, right? But if people actually go out of their way to like actually read and look for information, you can see all the viewpoints, you can see all the sides. It's not just coming to you from one side, unless you so choose to see it from only one side, which brings us to what the issue is today. People are now being just fed one narrative. They're only being shown one side when there's multiple sides. And all you have to do is literally just type, well, maybe not on Google because Google filters out the things that you can search, but there's other search engines that you can use, right? That's an availability for you, where you can search out for more unbiased opinions, more unbiased sources. That way you can be more well-informed as opposed to just taking whatever it is that's being fed to you from this filter. So there's one other thing. So do you hear the news about this platform called Parler?
No.
So essentially, it's another form of social media, and it was banned off the App Store because, unlike, you know, the big social media platforms like Facebook, Google, Twitter, these guys are relatively small, but they don't really have any limiting factors there. They kind of just let you do whatever you want. And there was this, I don't know if it was an article or what the case was, but the idea was that because this platform was so open and free, that potentially there could have been people that were kind of congregating there and kind of setting up a plan in order to actually take over on Capitol Hill when that event happened the other day. So that platform ended up getting completely removed off the App Store because of that, off the Google and Apple iTunes platform or App Store, right? So due to that, you know, you can say like, hey, so platforms that promote just general free speech are now being eliminated by these big corporations that aren't allowing you to say what you want to say. That's why they removed Trump, right? So that goes into now politics and policies there. So have you kept up to date with what's been happening in terms of like the government trying to fight these big corporations in terms of like their monopolies and the way they kind of go about doing all their stuff in order to, you know, just make money via advertisement, taking your information, taking your data, and just, have you ever like said some random thing and all of a sudden you start getting advertisements for things, things like that, right? So, you know, the government was trying to see if they can try to downsize these corporations, but, you know, at the end of the day, they didn't particularly win. These corporations are still considered to be big tech, and they usually lean Democratic or right or left, right? So they have a tendency of censoring anything from the opposite side. So to that end, there are two forms of legislation where these corporations have kind of just like full autonomy in terms of like what they can do in terms of censoring data. So one of the things is that, or one of the guidelines for all these platforms is that they can censor whatever speech they deem to be questionable, right? So regardless if that impedes on your right to free speech, if the platform or if the company decides that it's something that can be misconstrued as, you know, hate speech, or in the case of Donald Trump can be considered as stuff that can incite violence, they can censor it because the company decided that via their guidelines, they are deeming that as something that is bannable, which again impedes upon the rights to free speech. And that can be overridden by laws, right? But again, these corporations are really big. they have a lot of pockets, and they usually have a tendency of paying off these politicians. So policies like that won't really get passed unless there's a real reason to have it passed.
Absolutely. One point that you mentioned was that, you know, it's hard to live on an unbiased world, because this world overall, since since history, it's always been biased. Like censorship is not something that we are facing today. It's a modern type of censorship that we're dealing with, but censorship has been around for ever since like human beings existed. And there's this famous quote on George Orwell's book 1984 that says, "Who controls the past? Who controls the present controls the past," because the information that we gather or that we learn in the country that we live on or where we get our education is not going to be the same as the information that we get into a different country. For example, if we were to go to China, Google is not big over there. Amazon is not big over there. Alibaba is. So they control, like the same way that big tech controls over here some of the policies that goes around regarding data. Same thing happens over there in different countries, right? So the government always going to prioritize their nationalism, I would say, and they're always going to spread kind of like misinformation about other countries. And even the US does that. So like the Soviet Union, when on World War II, they made it part of the curriculum to teach kids that the Soviet Union was evil or the communism was evil. Where, and the communist countries, they thought democratic was evil and so forth. It's always a constant battle between that, where do you live? And you don't really get to see this bias until you move outside of that box, outside of your native country, because you grew up there. So the loyalty is always going to be there for you. Another quote that kind of fits in right into the context is that he controls information. He who controls information controls the world, and it's really, really, it kind of ties to what we're dealing with today, because there was a little kind of, I wouldn't say conspiracy, but there was like rumors that big tech was censoring a lot of conservative voices. So regardless, like I mentioned before, everybody should have a platform to express and make use of their First Amendment about freedom of speech. So when it comes to information, it can be harmful, and it will be biased. It will always be biased, for the reason that the way that I think is not going to be the same way that Randy thinks, or that whoever is listening to the podcast thinks, because we have our biases towards what is better to ourselves, or what is, what we identify for our people as well. So the point that I want to make is that we just gotta be aware. Just gotta kind of inform ourselves and look for other resources, rather than reading an article and just coming to a conclusion. Let's see if there's some supporting facts that makes this article true. So don't go out there just because you read a post on Facebook, just because you read a post on Instagram. It doesn't make the information true. So make sure that you always fact checking and double checking that the sources are correct, and that whatever information or conclusion that you come out with is because of the way that you think, and it's because it's something that aligns with your interest.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, that's pretty much it, man. So in terms of conclusion, just again, try not to be biased with this information that you're taking in, because a lot of the times it's being fed to you through a filter. We talked about it before very briefly, but like one of the kind of like neutral web browsers is called DuckDuckGo, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's the one that you can use where, like I was saying, Google can potentially be biased with the searches that you put in. So you search DuckDuckGo and you put in like what's actually happening in terms of whatever the news is that you're looking for, and maybe you get a more unbiased approach to to the information as opposed to something that's being filtered, so that you're being given a particular narrative, and that's what these people want you to believe.
Right. And even if we dive into the internet, what we see, think about like the Google being just like the tip of the ice. So like in an iceberg, usually what you see in the surface is just a little piece of island, right? A piece of ice. But if you submerge within the waters, there's a bigger piece. There's so much going on behind the scenes, and there's so much happening on the dark web. I'm not saying that you should go and check, but if you ever get a chance to like kind of see what is happening there, and you take the measurements, adequate measures to explore, it's interesting. The information that you will find over there, and it's crazy too. That's where Bitcoin was born, to be honest. Like, cool. All right. I think we can conclude on this topic for today.
Yep.
All right. So we can move on to fitness, caffeine, actually, not just coffee.
So yeah, obviously coffee does have caffeine, unless you take it decaffeinated, which then it doesn't. Are you drinking coffee now?
I have no clue what it is.
Okay, well.
My sister just left it in my room.
Cool.
It can be poisoned, but
we'll find out maybe by the end here. So caffeine. So obviously caffeine is literally, well, in the United States, it's something that everybody basically runs on nowadays. If you're somebody over the age of probably 18, maybe even younger at this point, you've been consuming caffeine for a while, right? So caffeine is essentially just a stimulant. And a stimulant is essentially just something to give you energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, like any stimulant or any good drug, you can easily get addicted to it and have these negative ramifications for prolonged use of it. So very often you'll find that most people that are constantly consuming caffeine in the form of coffee or tea or pre-workouts, they usually cannot get themselves off of it, because if they do, they feel like trash. They literally can't function. They can't wake up in the morning without a cup of coffee, because obviously they're not getting good night's rest, so they're not recovering well. So when they wake up in the morning, they're still tired, and the only way for them to actually feel like they're energized is to drink a cup of coffee. And then that's usually an issue, because they drink caffeine too late, which disrupts their sleep, which means they get shitty sleep, which means they need more coffee in the morning. So as you can see, this can be a pretty vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle, yes. So when it comes to caffeine, you have to be very careful of not over consuming it. Something that I usually recommend to most people, specifically with my clients, is to probably stop drinking coffee right around 12 p.m. 12 p.m. minimum, like if you really have to push it, or rather maximum, 2 p.m. So the reason for that is because caffeine has a half-life of about 6 hours. So it means every 6 hours you will feel diminishing return from that caffeine that you injected into your body. So to that end, try just to limit it and don't overdo it. Also, fuck, there's one thing I'm completely just blanking on right now. It'll probably come back to me, but what thoughts do you have?
All right. So I can take over in the meantime. So caffeine. I fucking love coffee. I drink it like black, straight black. Nothing crazy, no milk, no sugar, because it's true, it's bad. I do drink it almost on a daily basis. I try to stay away from it a couple days, but it doesn't really work. And you're right, it's one of those legal drugs, those drugs that are legal, and we just consuming it daily, and we just don't realize it. But caffeine, it's going to be found in not just coffee, it's going to be found on energy drinks, on tea, on a sort of variety of products that you and I consume every day. And like you mentioned, it has that after effect. So if you're one of the people like me who drinks coffee on a daily basis, and it stops for some motive or some reason, you stop drinking coffee, you're going to start getting like headaches. You're going to have like the similar withdrawals as if you stop any drug. So definitely you gotta be careful with it. There are some, I would say benefits to drinking coffee, like black coffee especially. Like it's a good detox, in my opinion.
Yeah, they have
And
some, some nice bowel movements when you drink it in the morning, right? They help you move those, make you take a poop in the morning. So that's
yeah,
useful.
that's actually correct. That's actually you hit the jackpot right there. After I drink my coffee, straight to the bathroom. So it's a good
So
digest. It helps you digest the food as well. But
yeah, yeah.
mhm, you got something
So
to add?
yeah. I remember what it was. I wasn't gonna add. So when it comes to like how do you end up overdoing it? Obviously, drinking late is an issue,
Mhm,
but also you're not really supposed to be over consuming caffeine to any particular degree. So usually 1 to 2 cups is a daily recommended amount of caffeine because that's roughly about 200 milligrams. The actual RDA, the recommended daily allowance, is about 300 milligrams. So it's about 3 cups of coffee. So you can get away with about three and not have too much of an issue.
mhm,
But anything more than that, that's when you start having these really crazy side effects, where you start having like heart issues, heart palpitations, your rhythm is off, you start hyperventilating, you start having anxiety or panic attacks because there's just too much caffeine in your system. So
mhm.
in terms of like how much, in terms of dosage, no more than 3 cups. Try to limit it before or after 12 p.m. And yeah, you go.
Yeah, I
Anything
mean,
else?
I think the what comes, one of the biggest dangers aside of the health issues when it comes to caffeine, more specifically coffee, is the danger that it does to your pocket. If you're one of those people that goes in the morning to a coffee shop like a Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, or you name it, and just grab a cup of coffee, these little things add up in the long run.
Mhm.
So you definitely have to be conscious on that as well. So, but
No, in
coffee,
terms of coffee is super addicting, but if you want to be budget friendly, then make it at home. Just make a big container and just take that with you. Uh, the last point to add on.
mhm.
So, and I just forgot it. That's great. Um,
What's wrong with you, bro? You're not even drunk
oh,
today.
no, not well, maybe a little bit. So one other thing that caffeine is actually beneficial for is for appetite suppressant. So caffeine has this property where it helps you kind of just not feel hungry after consuming it.
Mhm.
This is if you kind of make sure that you're not consuming it with any additives. So usually like milk or sugar can be a little problematic. But just straight caffeine, like black coffee, green tea, something like that, that actually helps you stave off any kind of hunger that you'd likely feel. So,
Mhm.
if you're somebody that struggles with eating, like you just love eating, maybe you can start using some caffeine in the morning. That way you don't eat so much in the morning. And then you can maybe push your eating to later in the day. That way you have a smaller period of time to eat. And within that logic, you're eating less. And yeah,
Right.
that's the last point.
Okay. So I have a question for you as a nutritionist. Do you see any difference in between consuming an energy drink? Oh, okay. Let me rephrase it. Is there a is there a difference on the consequences that caffeine has on a cup of coffee to an energy drink? For example, just a quick example. For example, I drink coffee like almost on a daily basis, but that's it. But what if there's another person who, instead of coffee, they drink Red Bull or Monster or those drinks with caffeine on it, like energy
Right,
drink. What
right,
is
right.
the difference on it?
So usually these energy drinks end up having, well, additives and preservatives, so that becomes an
Mm-hmm.
issue. And they have a tendency of having more caffeine than your average cup of coffee. And
Mm,
usually they can be pretty addicting and have sugar, which is also another problem. Or if it says zero sugar, then they do something else that maybe doesn't elicit the same response as sugar, but can have some longer term consequences because we don't have enough data and study to show that these alternative sugars don't actually harm the body in some other way. So yeah, that's what I would say about those two.
I mean, you definitely hit the jackpot on that. It has like all their additional ingredients that we might not be aware of. And this comes to like Coca-Cola. Last summer, I think it was, or like 2 summers ago, they released their caffeine drinks. I don't know if you had a chance to drink it, but that's actually a new market that a lot of companies are getting involved with. And even Starbucks has its own brand, with the coffee, like energy drink. I know this because I used to work in a hotel, and I used to work overnight. So usually a cup of coffee doesn't have any effect on me. So I used to rely on this sort of energy boosters, I would say.
Are they like big espresso shots, maybe?
For Coca-Cola or Starbucks?
Starbucks.
No, Starbucks is literally like
well.
a can, like this size, and it's an energy drink. It's kind of like a Red Bull, but a little bit bigger size. They do have like the espresso shots that you mentioned as well. They have a variety of.
Yeah, they have this bunch of variety of these stimulants. Yeah, but in any case, go simpler. Well, here's another thing. In terms of also pre-workouts, right? Because that's an energy drink as well. I would say if you're gonna do some type of caffeine, pick one or the other, but try not to do both, because that's where people have a tendency of overdoing it, and they over supplement on caffeine, and then that's where they get the panic attacks and anxiety and heart palpitations and rhythms. So yeah.
Right. All right. So let's move on to finance. Finance today, basics, real estate investing. You can take the lead on that. I know a little bit about real estate, but
Same.
I think you have a
That's
more
the
clear
basics.
understanding.
Yeah. So again, with this topic, we're literally just covering the broad strokes. We're both not really too much invested into real estate. I mean, you're a little bit more than I am. But yeah, just to give you some general ideas, like how you can go about it, what are some different ways you can go about it. So in the same way we talked about, finance, there's a bunch of different ways you can diversify your portfolios and investing strategies and trading strategies. Same idea with real estate. So one of the most fundamental ones is renting, right? You buy a piece of property and then you rent it out to somebody. So this doesn't really cover any additional costs, like in case you have to do repairs beforehand or afterhand due to the tenants. It depends on what type of property you're buying, right? You can buy just like a single floor place, or you can buy a multiplex or an apartment complex. The more money you have, obviously, the more you can scale in terms of what you can buy. After that, then we get into buying and selling, or that's called flipping, right? So you buy, if there's any renovation that needs to be done, you do that, and then you sell it for a profit. Usually this is for those individuals that kind of just like to get in and out of deals. They find a good deal, they do whatever renovations they have to do, and they sell it for good profit. And usually a good range is anywhere from about 40, 50 to 100K. That's usually some solid profit that most people end up making, if not more. What's the other option? Wholesale. So wholesaling is essentially you finding property and basically being the mediator between the seller and a buyer, right? So you essentially get the rights from a seller and then you sell that to a buyer. You acquire some funds and then you kind of end up being the person that gets a commission for finding the deal. And yeah, that's about the basics that I have of it.
Okay, so wholesaling wouldn't be the like what a retailer does, not retailer, like real estate guy does.
Yeah, like a real estate agent, essentially. It kind of you're the one finding the good deal, and then you're trying to find somebody that has the funds in order to purchase, and then obviously once that the transaction has been made, you kind of just get yourself out of that situation. So usually that you're really only aiming for about 5 to 15K in terms of profit, and that's it. You kind of just walk away with no problems.
Right. Okay. Yeah. For me, real estate, honestly, it reminds me to the game Monopoly, in a sense. So I'm the type of investor that I would definitely invest on the more prominent, or like the more like a piece of land, a piece of property that
Recurring,
has, what's up?
something that's recurring, permanent.
Yeah, more permanent, like a more long-term
Hmm.
investment. I think that would be the best way to go about, in my opinion. In some basic real estate investing, I would say definitely start, you know, exploring your options. So maybe wholesaling might be the right step to start investing if you don't have the capital, especially because it can, be costly. It will be one of those investments that you are going to need some sort of capital, at least 10% to be more specific, to get into a deal, right? So let's start with wholesaling. Later on, you can move on to flipping houses. So if you got the connections for a good, like maybe family members or friends who do constructions for a good deal, you can start flipping houses and build your wealth until you start buying more permanent houses for rent, because that's where the money is. Because if you are able to find a good deal or a good house in a good location, maybe maybe right now is not as populated as it might become in like 10 to 15 years, or maybe the property is not as valuable, or like the rent is not as valuable as in 5 to 10, 15 years. If you are able to acquire that piece of land and rent it out with an increment of rent yearly, you can pay it off just by rent, just by using rent. So that's something that, one of my goals later on in the future, of course. But
Hmm.
yeah, so I usually like to see that it start small and then eventually build it. So, you start learning about the market, learning how it works, pretty much start playing the game, because real estate, it's eventually a game. You
Hmm.
can
It's
lose.
like anything, man. You can lose, you can win big, but I probably well, I wouldn't say it's like the market, just like the stock
No.
market, because it doesn't have as many mood swings, right?
You're right. Right.
Uh, but take a
Yeah, it's tough.
situation like we're in now, right? Like property values have gone down. Um, so it's not always sunshines and rainbows. But go ahead.
Yeah, I wouldn't compare it to the stock market, because
Mm-hmm.
they're completely different markets. The stock market is one thing, the real estate business is another, because there comes more risks. I would say it in a sense, because with the stock market, it's always going to be going up, whereas real estate, you can lose money in there. So it's different games, similar structure, but all right. So some basics we covered it. There are three types of how you can start on your real estate business: wholesaling, renting, and flipping houses.
Mm-hmm.
Very basic. And yeah, I think that covers that. So let's move on into some news for the day. This one is interesting. JC launched a 10 million fund to invest in minority-owned cannabis companies. La
That's cool.
marijuana is coming
Mm-hmm.
out. And you already know, with President Biden, he had talks about like legalizing marijuana on a federal level. And Cuomo, it's kind of like taking the initiative here in New York. So we might see those, actually ACV and Thailand, TLRY,
Tilray.
Tilray, there
Tilray.
you go. There were positive numbers this past weeks, really good returns on there. All right, tech was the strongest sector today. XLK, which is the ETF for the big tech, cruised 1.3% and closed at another all-time high. Financials fell 1%, and energy tumbled 3.4. You know why? I've been saying it.
Well,
Because of President Biden killed the Keystone XL pipeline. So we talked a little bit yesterday about it, how energy was gonna take a major hit on this, and this is why energy felt the pressure today. Hey,
mm-hmm,
hey,
mm-hmm.
get it? Pressure pipes. Oh, you didn't get the joke. Anyways,
No, I got
Americans,
it.
Americans, Apple. Well, Apple was fucking skyrocketing today, like crazy. Like, what are you doing, Apple? Anyways, E advanced 3.67%, and E pretty much ticket a new all-time high. if I'm not mistaken, it was at 138.
138 something. It was all-time high.
Correct. Yes, Apple's earnings reports are coming on on January 27. So we gonna stay in the lookout. There's no major event aside of that. So I'm thinking the catalyst behind this crazy rally is because of the earnings report. There might be another story. We might find out tomorrow. But okay, boom. Bitcoin broke down to levels not seen in like 10 days, because this past 2 weeks it
10
has
days.
been
Damn.
it has been pumping out, and at the moment of this recording it's sitting on 29,900,000, but it did go all the way into $28,800. So we will see if it continues to rally and the trend up. So we gotta wait and just be patient with it, to be honest, at this point.
Always scale small, right? Always start with a small position and scale small. Otherwise, you will regret it, because then you'll be in a bag holding forever, waiting for that thing to finally recover, which could be in a week, month, or a year from now.
Right. Well, I'm not really trading Bitcoin. I just put some money in there.
Yeah, investing, right? But if you're investing long term, also same thing. Small positions, adding over time.
Right.
I feel like Jesus Christ, what happened?
Good. All right. So last but not least, so this is kind of piggybacks from the foundation's topics of today. Twitter suspended the Chinese embassy account after its tweet about Muslim Uyghurs. So Twitter backed the suspicious with its anti-dehumanization policy. So to begin with, Twitter removed that tweet from the Chinese embassy, which called, I cannot pronounce this, Uyghur women emancipated, claiming they were no longer baby-making machines. The suspension followed the Trump administration's accusations of China's genocide against Muslims Uyghurs. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing this. While the Biden administration has also supported these claims, they haven't commented. They haven't put a strong positions on those. It's really sad what is happening in China, and this is what we're talking about, censoring all these high-profile accounts. But you know, there's something that we didn't mention: how certain informations are being held away from us that are facts, and we're not aware of what is happening around the globe, because the social medias that just don't want us to know. So
So yeah, in China, you can say that the censorship is happening over there because of the government, how strong that is. And over here, we're getting censorship via the big corporations that may have a lot of influence in the government, right? So we got censorship going on all around. So how do we solve this?
There's not a clear solution, honestly.
Aliens, baby. Where are the aliens?
Bro, where are the fucking aliens? It's 21.
Waiting.
It's January 21. You predicted on January 20. Too late.
No, I was waiting for Biden. They were going to come down exactly when he got inaugurated. They were going to beam him up into a spaceship.
Sure.
They didn't show up, unfortunately.
All right. Without that, aside of that, guys, I will see you next week. Peace out.
Take care.
What the is we doing?